Well, hello and welcome to the first trading day of October, the first trading day of the fourth quarter of 2024, right here in Lagos, Nigeria. But let's get to the top stories that set your agenda for this, holiday shortened week right here in Nigeria. But the oil market, that's open for this week. Oil prices have jumped over $1 today due to rising concerns. Middle East tensions could escalate, potentially disrupting crude output from the region following Iran's biggest ever military blow against Israel. Now we see yesterday was up about 2%. That was Brent, but we're still seeing that rise today, $75.08 a barrel, moving farther away from the $70 level. WTI, that's the U.S. grade, 2.29% up this morning, $71.43 a barrel. So all eyes, investors still watching what's playing out right there in the Middle East, and we're seeing the impacts on prices already. Could this escalate and take oil prices even higher? We'll definitely be tracking that and what happens next. But to the FX market, we'll see the last trading day of September ended with a marginal loss. That's for the NAFEM window. If we put up the FX markets, so it's a marginal loss about 0.08%. Then we see NAFEX that had a bigger drop there for the FX market, and we're in a new quarter now, so definitely all eyes on how the Naira is going to perform for this fourth quarter. But it's down for the third quarter, 1,541 Naira. That was a close, 0.08% down. NAFEX, 1,673 Naira, down 0.30%. So a lot of conversations about the Naira and strengthening. But yesterday, to celebrate Nigeria at 64, we have the Channels Economic Forum focusing on Nigeria's challenging economy and strategies for recovery. And we had a solid panel, of experts, private sector players, and also the public sector and the captains of industry to give us their expert view on the matter. So we had the Deputy Governor of Lagos State, Mr. Kadri Hamzat. He spoke about how Lagos is pushing to boost food supply. Take a listen.
We occupy 0.4% of the landmass of this country, but we populate our state with 10% of Nigerians. So what that means is the density is very high. Because we are the smallest in terms of land, but we are the most populous. What that means is there is not enough land for agriculture. There is some, but there is not enough. So when you compare it to a state like Niger, Niger is about 7.9% of the population, of the land mass of Nigeria, compared to 0.4%. So Ogun State is about 4 times bigger than us in terms of land, but the population is 3 million. So what that means is that the land available for agriculture in Lagos. So what do we then decide to do? Because we know we don't have enough land. So this country, for example, consumes 40 million bags of rice a year, okay? But Lagos, you can be sure, takes about 30% of that. So what that means for us, that's why we say, okay, let's build a rice mill that can process it. And then we have arrangement with other states in terms of partnership. We have land in Osun State. We have an agreement with Niger State. But because of the insurgency, the paddies were not produced enough. So that's part of the challenge that we have. So for Lagos, our area is training people, empowering the people that actually get involved in agriculture. A lot of our women across Badagry to Ikorodu. So we identified our area of where we have competitive advantage. Fisheries, for example. Tomato, surprisingly. So tomato. We have an area in Badagry, Dadilui, they call the place, is an island. We have 200 women farming, 200 hectares of land there. You need to go there, it's extensive. So what we do is how do we empower them? How do we make it easier for them in terms of production? But most importantly, we also now we are building a logistic hub in Emota, the biggest in this part of the world. What that does for us is it allows us to track what comes to Lagos. So Lagos, interestingly, we slaughter cows like 3,000 every day. So where are they coming from? How can we track it? How can we make sure that today, if anything happens, our veterinary doctors slaughter them and burn them off to prevent diseases? But we need to do better. What that means is, so if it's coming from Kano, for example, we can say, oh, Kano, you have this problem with your car, so stop it, let's help us treat it, and then we stop it. So the same thing, and then we'll be able to store grains for 9 months. So let's say production stops around the world. We should be able to store for 9 months and see what we're doing. So that's what we are building. And then we are building small markets, like the one in Idioro, where you and me can go. What that does for us is it gives us data. So today, we know that within 4 months, we know that those women and men selling in that market makes 2.1 billion naira. So we know that information. We also know that because they are now aggregating their produce and everything, the cost of logistics has gone down by 40% because they can get a trailer and then they're moving. Also because there is dry storage, there is wet storage, and so on. They can actually store their products.
All right, that's the Deputy Governor of Lagos State, Dr. Kadri Hamzat. And definitely, Nigeria also dealing with a cost of living crisis with headline inflation driven by high energy costs, with the shock of paying up to 1,000 naira per litre for PMS. Our panelists also, highlighted the issues and possible solutions to ending energy poverty in Nigeria. Take a listen.
Nigeria started importing crude in 1972. Nigeria is 64 years old today. So the problem is only about 12 years younger than Nigeria. So to your point, do we have a refinery? Yes, we do today. There's a huge opportunity to solve that problem, that 52-year-old problem. So from an energy security standpoint, it's huge. Whichever side of the divide that you sit, it is a huge thing that today we can solve that. But I always say, before we talk about energy security, I think that's the way we need to frame this question. Before you say energy security, before you secure anything, you have to have it first. So actually, the point I'm making is, there are 3 sides to this coin. It's not 2 sides. There are 3 sides. The first side of the coin is energy access. Do we even have this energy? You walk out of here, probably not today, but certainly a month ago, 2 months ago, you see long queues. Does the energy even exist? Do we even have it? So energy access is number 1. And there was a recent study by one of our analysts. If you take the average taxi driver, say in Lagos, he spends, believe it or not, a minimum of 72 hours in the petrol station queuing a month. 72 hours queuing. Sum that up into a year, probably works out to be about 35 days. That's about 10% of his year, just queuing. Non-productivity, that man can be working, contributing to the economy. He's not, he's queuing, spending time, all of that. So energy access, question 1. If you do have the energy, then the second thing is energy affordability, and it leads to a question of price. And, we're going to have that discussion. So the second leg of the second part of that coin is energy affordability. We have the energy, can we afford it before we talk security?
But we're talking about accessibility, alternative energy. That's what everybody's talking about. The world is talking about renewables. We're still flaring gas, which is supposed to be potential to help us to gain on this. And we saw Mr. Tupac talk about, the costs. The number of people who have been excluded from even accessing this.
You're right. I'm going to maybe throw a shocker to the audience. It might not be a shock to some of us here. Nigeria has the highest deposit of natural gas reserve in the whole of Africa. Nigeria has almost about 6 trillion standard cubic meters of gas under the ground. So, question of availability shouldn't be our problem in Nigeria. We have abundance of gas. I'm taking this towards the direction of energy for transportation. For a thriving economy, people need to move from A to B. Goods need to move from A to B. So we need to move people around. So if we tap into our gas reserves, experts have it that our gas reserves will last anywhere from above 10 decades to 30 decades, what we have in the ground. Nigeria being a the highest in natural gas reserves is still not exploiting it for obvious reasons. Everyone is focused on petroleum. And that's why I applaud some of the initiatives of the current administration when it comes to energy initiatives. The compressed natural gas initiative is one of them. Previous administration started the Decade of Gas initiative, and also the current administration is trying to ramp up domestic gas utilization. We haven't even, what we're dealing with now is what I could call associated gas, which means by the process of drilling crude oil, we come across gas and we capture it and try to do one or two things with it. We haven't even talked about non-associated gas. We're just going into the ground to drill to get gas out. If we begin to do that, availability will be least of our issues. Now, most experts gauge energy security with most of my colleagues have touched on that, with the 4 A's of energy security. Is it accessible? Is it acceptable to the people? Is it affordable? And is it available? We have all the resources in Nigeria to slam through these 4 A's. But there are many drawbacks. I'll go towards the compressed natural gas. With the new initiative from the federal government, compressed natural gas is the low-hanging fruit for transportation. We see the news coming out of the Middle East. Guess what's going to happen to crude oil and all the byproducts of crude oil? They might go way over the roof. Now, this is the time. If we begin to exploit these, government policies are boosting these sectors. There are lots of private investors going into the CNG. A company that I represent, we are beginning to churn out CNG vehicles. I stopped by today to fill up my work pickup truck with CNG just along Ilupeju, Mushi area. Okay, I paid 2,400 naira to fill up the tank, and it's affordable in today's context. So if we solve the availability issue with CNG, solve the affordability issue with CNG, let's begin to work on acceptance.
And yeah, so much robust conversations yesterday, and there's been a lot of talk about ease of doing business in Nigeria, but are we seeing any progress yet? This next panel, they dissected the issues and preferred actionable solutions. Take a listen.
Perhaps if we did not have these reforms, perhaps if on that day the president did not say subsidy is gone, perhaps things would have been better.
Well, let me say that I want to commend NNPC for what they're doing now. A lot of people do not know that PMS is being subsidized for us. I think about 200 and something naira on it. And that's why the position they're taking, that they are buying from Dangote and selling to other marketers, is actually to bridge the gap. I wish they could do more, because subsidy is gone may not be the right description. Is actually subsidy have been reduced. So I would say that if they could reduce further, which is looking at the low-hanging fruit that we talk about. Because when you see the low-hanging fruit, DG, NECA, and the man said the fruit is already on ground, like Taiwo also said. But the most dangerous thing is if you don't have food in view, you can actually keep fasting and endure. But when there is a promise that this food is yours, then you begin to see the saliva, the movement, and you want to catch the food. That's why government need to now look at it and say the promises that we are making, that comfort is coming, government need to also bear additional cost. Look, I was discussing with Coleman before now. If you have, in fact, there is an investment that I was involved in a supermarket. Your 100 million has turned to 25 million.
A lot of Nigerians say they are frustrated because you are telling us to be patient. Even today, I think the president did say we should be patient. But are we seeing those signs of patience? Perhaps if there was reduction in the cost of governance, some of those could be plowed in as subsidy for the people.
I totally agree with you. I think the reality of anything for anybody is, they say leadership is by leading by example. If you tell me that I should tighten my belt, I need to see you to tighten some belt. It might not be as big as I am tightening, but at least I need to see a sign that you are tightening your. So if I'm getting lean, you too have to follow. Now, but if you are getting fatter and I'm getting lean, I'll query your sense of direction. Now, that's the reality we're in today. Let's just say that everybody believes that you're telling all of us to be lean. Now, the reality, just for what he said, on the case of a manufacturer, is even worse. That 100 million turn 25. Believe me, 25 million cannot run inside that factory and make money to pay the salary. Because there's what is called a minimum capacity utilization of your processes, which you must match. If, for instance, a factory needs to run at 40% minimum to break even, if it goes to 25, it is losing money, because what is happening is that the material going in is being eroded by the overhead.
It's a tough situation. Let's be, there is no way you can. There is no argument, and I hope that those in the policy arena also they will understand this. Even when you have a clear purpose, you know where you are going, you know the type of the economic problems that you want to solve. I believe we still need to have a kind of an idea that will help us to minimize the cost from the other side. He has mentioned typical case of the inflation and interest rate, and how the interplay between these also impact on our FX. Yes, of course. Based on the CBN's evidence, CBN said as of June this year that the money in circulation now is about 5-point-something trillion from 2.6 last year, June. So within a year, we kind of have maybe 50%, So that, from the perspective of the CBN, is a huge problem. And I believe that is one of the reasons why the drive for increasing the interest rate, has always been persistent. And of course, even when you are increasing the interest rate with the aim of capturing the inflation, the challenge is still going to be there both ways for the business people, both ways. Even if you reduce the interest rate and the inflation is going at, just like I said, you have 100 million within 2 months. What you are having is actually 20 million. So it's a big challenge, and I think that globally, anywhere, what should be the most important thing is for us to see a clear signal. When the government shows the signal and says, I know what we're going through, but this is the approach. Let's address this. While addressing this, there could be some little interventions here and there to ease the challenges, as I said, but I think that is the core of the problem, because if we have switched the thing now, the other way we have low interest rates and we have inflation, it becomes a national problem. It affects business will be just wrecked. People will job. So it's a big challenge, and that's why I was referring to the macroeconomic instability.
For me and for colleagues, even in the private sector with MAN, I think the stabilization bill is one of the things we think can change the narration. And it was also a positive for us when the committee was formed, the presidential committee. It takes an administration with some level of guts to get that kind of team together to actually review the kind of things they've reviewed, to make the kind of fundamental recommendations that they've made, And whether it was circumstantial or whether it was deliberate, the fact that the committee has worked assiduously and come up with those recommendations, which we have to a large extent adopted in the private sector because of the far-reaching consequences, positive consequences of those recommendations, is for us to now ensure that those recommendations, they don't go the way of the same policies that you mentioned. And that comes back to building institutions that I mentioned earlier, that beyond politics, I think it's also time that we start advocating for economic institutions that are independent, irrespective of a government that comes in.
So there are two very important policies of the government that people blame for the economic hardship. One of it is the fuel subsidy reduction, and then the flotation of the naira. And I think we have to come to a realization that the conversation or the debate should not be about whether those things should have been done or whether it would have been better if we had retained what we had before. That was not an option. Take the FS, for example. We're owing over 7 billion backlog. So it was actually a subsidy regime. FS subsidy regime was what we had. We had borrowed billions of dollars against our reserve. We're not even sure what the net was going to be. So the economy was collapsing. We didn't have the headroom to continue with that. I believe that if we had sustained that regime, we would be in a worse situation today than we are now. The subsidy reduction, if we had sustained it, the government was spending about 96% of their revenue just to service debt, and they were printing money to do everything else. When you keep printing money, the impact will be more devastating than what we have now. So that's also not an option. So the debate should be, are there other ways we could have done it, not whether we should have done it? I think that's very fundamental. If I want to sum it up, because I know our time is up, it's that the major problem we have today, the biggest challenge to the economy is the FX. If we can get FX to under 1,000, you have the impact everywhere. Inflation will come down, band A tariff will be maybe like half. You're going to have a lot of things would improve. What the data is showing us is that between June 14 last year, when Naira was floated, and now, we've actually received net inflow of FX. Yet our Naira has lost more value. So what we find is that we have significant illicit demand. You need to find a way to take that illicit demand out of the market so you can have only just legitimate demand. And the diaspora remittances of about 20 billion, we see about 4 to 5 within the official market. About 15 billion is being either externalized or finding its way to the black market. So the plan we're trying to do now is for the fiscal to complement the monetary to address this issue so that by this time next year, we have more good news to share, and not what we're planning to do, but what we have done.
Definitely a lot was unpacked yesterday. The conversations touched on every part of Nigeria's economy. And, from what was said, so far, it seems like once we solve this FX issue, that's, gone into raised prices of PMS, and we're seeing energy prices rising, and we're also seeing, food prices also rising with headline inflation, food inflation. So it seems like if we're able to solve that FX issue, then that's going to dovetail into other parts, and maybe we can start seeing, regular prices again. I don't remember what it feels like to actually, experience regular prices. It's been so long. We've just been dealing with high inflation, and hopefully we can also join other central bankers in the world that are cutting rates. Now it's rate cutting season, and it'd be nice to actually see, Nigeria join that trend, at some point. Hopefully, soon we're able to tame this sky high inflation. But all eyes on the fiscal and monetary side of things. But today, as the first trading day of October, and definitely for the last trading day of September, we know the market at the end at 98,000 points, was up about 0.1% for that last trade. But for the quarter, that's for the third quarter, we see the all-share index down about 1.5%. That's if you're looking at the third quarter of 2024. So investors now be wondering what's going to play out in this fourth quarter of 2024? Will it be profit-taking, or are we going to see, some of these investors trying to cherry pick? And definitely we know the bank recapitalization, that's still, on the front burner. So we've seen some recovery, when it comes to the banking index, and we're also watching interest rates right here. We know interest rates, when they rise, it's good for most of these banks, but also has its downside, to their profit. But year to date, 31.8%. That's still for the all-share index. So what's going to happen in this fourth quarter? We're definitely going to be unpacking that. Also on Business Incorporated, we'll get the intraday analysis, and also on Capital Market, we'll get a review of everything that's played out for this first holiday shortened trading week right here in Nigeria. So there's so much to unpack, and definitely we'll be, getting a check on how the counters actually play out. We see some counters actually, getting into recovery. We know the banking counter was suppressed for the longest time, but did start to, rise again and close about 1.1%. That was for Monday. That was the last trading day of September. Insurance, that's also financial services. That was able to get a 2.1% boost. Oil and gas, that was unchanged. The usual unchanged suspect. Industrial goods index, that closed down. That's for Monday, 1.1%. So we're seeing most of these stocks, most of these laggards, trying to show, some moves right there in the market, with investors actually, putting attention, in some of these markets. Market cap still at 56.63 trillion. So everyone's just wondering what's going to play out, what's going to be that catalyst that can drive the all-share index back above the 100,000 level. What's it going to be? We still have one more rate-setting meeting right here in Nigeria. Everyone's expecting maybe another hike, but who knows? Maybe the MPC might say, okay, maybe it's time to hold. But from what was said last time, investors don't focus on what the central bankers do, but they also focus on what was said, forward guidance. That's what investors are going to be looking out for. So I'll give you a summary of how the markets are closed today. That'll be on News at 10. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Ladi Williams. I hand things back over to the Sunrise Daily team.